Good afternoon. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome each and every one of you to our March edition of our SciTech Lecture Sessions. The SciTech series began back in 2010 at the college, and since that time we have had over 30 speakers and over 1,800 participants as an audience. And each time we do this, we believe that we are creating what will be a best practices and a good example for others as they look at us for SciTech at the North Carolina Community College System level and with our National Center for the Bio Network or the workforce. We feel like that this series contributes a lot of great things to our community. We have world-class speakers who come in and speak to us, and it's wonderful when one of those speakers actually is someone who we work with on a daily basis. So I would welcome you again. I would invite you to come back for future lectures. I would invite you, if you're new to our campus, to look around. Now, maybe not today because it's kind of wet, but come back and look us over and just enjoy being at for SciTech because we do. Now, to introduce our speaker, someone who knows her a lot better than I do, I'd like to introduce Mr. Lauren Dingler.
Good afternoon. I do have the distinct privilege of knowing our speaker today, Miss Bryant. I've known her for quite a few years. Real quick little bio about her. Thank you for her service. She served in the U.S. Navy for 5 years, and I kid her about it was some kind of top secret clearance, double knot spy that she can't tell us about, and she still won't tell me everything that she did while she was in the Navy. But that's where she gets a lot of the knowledge that she teaches you, the students, with. And then she went to the Winston-Salem Police Department, where she served there for 10 years in a non-sworn capacity, but ever so important as a crime scene technician, also as a specialist in latent print examination. So that's very, very much a feather in her cap when she's also teaching you. She worked for us for 4 years as an adjunct instructor, and then we were fortunate enough to hire her away from the Winston-Salem Police Department, where she's been with us 3 years full-time as an instructor as criminal justice latent evidence. But she also helps with criminal justice across the board and fills in. And I have the distinct privilege of watching her teach and mold the students. And it's really awesome what she does. When I do her classroom evaluation, she cares about the students, and she's a wealth of knowledge. She also helps me with the BLET cadets, train the future law enforcement officers to how to investigate crime scenes as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ms. Jennifer Bryant.
Now, he wired me. I'm not used to being wired. I told him I could project way back there in the back, so he didn't need to do it. But he said that there's a little bit of audio, so you have to hear me. So I'm not used to it. If it sounds a little funny, it's his fault. Blame him, audio guy. He's hiding behind his camera, but he's there. I am Jennifer Bryant. Most of people that talk to me call me JJ. All my students, that's what I'm referred to as, because that's all I've ever known. Military and in law enforcement, both. And I will walk, so I'll keep you occupied watching me walking back and forth across the stage. I get bored, so I can't stand in one spot. Csi Effect, that's what we're here today. I love teaching because it's the one thing that we all watch on TV, right? There's nobody in this room that has not seen CSI, right? If you are, please, you haven't seen CSI? Are you in the cave? Okay, you're teasing. This phenomenon came about in 2000. They started CSI. The producer of the show started following around a Las Vegas crime scene unit. There's a show called Cold Justice now. Anybody seen Cold Justice? About a prosecutor and a crime scene investigator that go across the country looking at cold cases. The crime scene investigator in that new show is the one off one of his characters in CSI. She's retired now. He followed her around for 6 months and watched what these people did when he was writing the show, when he was coming up with the whole concept of the crime scene show. And it's a great show. It's a lot of entertainment, but it's a lot of misconceptions. And people that are not in law enforcement and that sit on jurors, they don't really know. They see it on TV and they think, hey, you did that in an hour, great, let's get it solved and we're done, we're out of here. And that's not how it works. And so part of our jobs as crime scene investigators, and I have a shirt that says I was CSI before CSI was cool, is to go out and educate the public. So when we come out to your crime scene, you're the victim, and we try to make you understand that we are there for you and we're going to do our job for you, but it's not going to happen in an hour. We're not going to find the bad guy. We're not going to analyze all the evidence. We're not going to prosecute him, and he's not going to go to jail in an hour. It's not going to happen. So in a way, we're educating the public every time we respond to a crime scene because of the show. And yes, some of us still watch the show because you can't help it. It's like a train wreck. You keep flipping around, and there you see it, and you stop, and you watch it. And there's so many of them now that you can't help but find something on TV related to crime scene. If I can do it right. My little clicker. So this is what it is. This is the Csi Effect. There's several studies that have looked at the Csi Effect and how it affects jury members. And they say that it's this misconception that can sway juries. Because the jury members believe everything they see on TV, and if the CSI that's sitting there giving testimony is not showing them the same things they saw on TV, then it can't be believable. That what they're telling them is a lie. Because they're using all that misinformation that they get from the TV. So this is where this came about. Studies have been done. Some studies, of course, this is math, statistics, and those numbers can be swayed in whichever favor you want to be. So some statistics state that there is no effect, and some say there are. So it's still being studied. A lot of research is still being done by those seeking their master's and their doctoral degrees, trying to determine if this is really a true phenomenon. Little joke. Lawyer talking to them that there were 10 eyewitnesses and he has motive. His client pled guilty, so he must be guilty. And of course the jury member was like, where's the DNA? Where's the DNA? That's everything. If you've got DNA, then that's golden, right? It's not true. It's not true. DNA is not all that it's cracked up to be. My students learn that. They learn how easy it is for DNA to be there at crime scenes when the even person was not even there. It's very possible. We have called transfer evidence or transient evidence. So you have to look at all the evidence combined. DNA is not the golden child. So there's your shows. The main show, CSI, New York and Miami spun off from those two shows. These were the bread and butter for a long time. CSI, the main CSI from Las Vegas, is still going on. Even today, it started in 2000, we're in 2015, and there's still new shows, new characters, still new shows. Miami and New York are gone. They didn't last very long. They came and they went. But these shows broke off even more shows. So look at all you have now. CSI started this effect with all these different crime scene shows. 360, the first 48, based off of real stories, real crimes taking place. And then, of course, you have some of the other more fictional TV. But all these spun off of CSI. And are we training criminals to be better criminals by these shows? This is the factor that a lot of police and law enforcement ask, are we telling them how to be better criminals? How to hide the evidence that we're trying to find based off these shows? Because you know they're watching them. I would. But not only in the United States are there spin-offs from CSI, in other countries you have crime scene shows now. Let's see. My bad. I'm hitting wrong buttons. I apologize, because I do not know how this one works, but we will fix it. So you have Russia. This is Sweden, Philippines, Australia, and India. All those different countries have crime scene shows, just like CSI. And that's what this story originally started out. So now everybody's doing it. CSI in 2012 was ranked the most watched television show in the world. And it was the 5th year that that was ranked that way. And it's syndicated, so that means that it's being shown throughout the United States on some channel at some point in time, 24 hours a day. That's nuts. So in television CSI, all my students ask me, do I get to drive a Hummer? Where's your Hummer? There it is. Television CSI, they have these beautiful, nice cars, nice Hummers, these big Dodge Chargers, fast cars that get you there to the crime scene. That's what you're waiting for. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Winston-Salem PD, we have Dodge Chargers. We have the soccer mom vans. I'm not knocking them, that's just what we drive. But this is reality. This is what we drive. Big box trucks. Why? We average about 400 to 500 pounds of equipment that we haul around from crime scene to crime scene. We don't run right back to the lab after we pick up one piece of evidence. We have to carry the stuff with us. We have to carry all the things we are going to need to process that scene. And sometimes, because there's not 100 of us working at one shift, there's 4 or 5 of us and we're covering the whole city, you may not go from that call back to the office. You have to go to another call, and another call, and another call. And you're gone from the time you get there to the time it's time to go home, running from call to call. That's reality. In CSI Las Vegas, they go to one call, they pick up the evidence, and they take it right back to the lab. And then they analyze all the evidence, and then they go find the suspect. That's not how it happens. They bring the suspect in and they sit down and they interrogate them. CSIs don't interrogate. That's not our job. That's the job of a detective. Our job as CSI is to collect the evidence. We go to the scene, we collect the evidence, we bring it back, we analyze it. But do we all do it within an hour? No. Do we do it within 2? No. That evidence will sit and wait because we've got another call and another call and another call. Crime's not waiting for that one case. The city doesn't shut down for us to solve that one case and move to the next one. It doesn't work that way. So this is reality. These are the nice trucks you get to learn how to drive, or the Dodge Caravans, or the Jeep Cherokees, or whatever you want to haul your gear around in, but it's not the Hummers. Sorry. Most police agencies can't afford one Hummer, and if they do, it's tactical. It's been donated by the military, and that's how they've got it, and they use it for SWAT, not CSI. The uniforms, yes, nice, pretty on TV. You got a lot of cleavage showing if you're a female, which is great for the guys. The guys get to wear blue jeans. And then you have our favorite here from NCIS. Everybody loves her. She gets to wear God knows what. We don't know. This is the Christmas special, I believe, where she had her Santa stockings on. We don't wear this. She's in white, okay? This is stuff called black powder. Black powder and white do not mix, ever. She would look horrible if she went out to a scene in white. Let's see, on crime scenes, is there anything called, blood? So in white, it's probably not the best choice of colors that you would pick to wear on a crime scene. So this is television. Nice, pretty uniforms. Reality. Big difference. We have old coveralls, khakis, and these are nice. This right here is your whites. Isn't it pretty? Big difference between that white, right? These are Tyvek suits. These protect you from all those biological hazards that come along with the blood and the guts and the nastiness that you find on crime scenes. This is the good stuff that saves you. So that's the kind of what you want to wear. Gloves, lots and lots of gloves. Boots. Those are the things, not high heels. Not those 4-inch high heels you see the females wear on CSI on TV and they're walking around the crime scene. Definitely not. This is reality. This is what you wear. It's pretty, isn't it? Isn't it nice? But you're going to get it dirty. It's designed to get dirty, throw it in the washing machine, clean it, put it back on, go back to work. How many times do you watch CSI? Perfectly good house, they've got electricity, and they walk in with a flashlight and fail to hit the switch on the wall to turn on the overhead lights. What's wrong with that? Is it against the law to hit the switch? No, but it makes good TV. It's good drama when everything's dark and spooky. So they don't ever turn the lights on. If the house doesn't have power, you got to use a flashlight. And you can see a lot with a flashlight. Don't get me wrong, but turn this light switch on. Between this light and a flashlight, you see so much more. So this is television. This is reality. Not only are you trying to take a photograph, but you have to hold a flashlight at the same time. So now you've got a camera and a flashlight and hoping you have enough light. This is reality. Blood and guts, up close and in your face as you're trying to record the evidence. It's all about the things that we see. A flashlight is utilized necessity, but it's utilized as a tool to see and enhance trace evidence. My students have learned that when you hold a flashlight in a certain angle, you can see things better. So if we're looking across a table and we hold a flashlight on this end, we can see fingerprints that have touched along that table. We're not looking down like this. We're looking across. So it enhances. But it's not the only light source we use. This is great. This lights up a room, great. We use the flashlight as added enhancement. Television CSI. Oh, I love this. This is my favorite part. I'm a latent print examiner. I look at fingerprints. I would look at fingerprints for 8 hours a day. And what a latent print examiner does is they decide if it's your fingerprint or if it's not. So that's what I did. CSI, you put a fingerprint in a computer and they search it just like this, and it pops up, oh, it's him. There's his picture, there's his date of birth, this is what he had for breakfast, here's his cell phone number, and this is where he's at right now. Go get him. Love it. Every law enforcement agency in the world would love to have one that works this way. I promise you. It would be great. But in reality, you have this. All it does is searches that fingerprint and brings you back some possible candidates that may or may not be the right one. And the examiner has to look at all of them and decide if it is a match. And it doesn't give you a name, it gives you a number. So then you have to search that number to find out who that fingerprint belongs to. So it's not a quick, throw it in the computer, spit out who it belongs to, and let me go arrest him. It's a lot longer process. How many in here believe that people have the same fingerprints? None of you? What about identical twins? They have the same DNA. They have to have the same fingerprints, right? Why not? That's right. My students, I can tell. But for those who don't know, identical twins do not share the same DNA to what we code for. Now, if you pull out that strand a little bit further, you're going to see that they have different DNA. It's just that we don't code for all that whole long strand in your body. We only code for the first 13 alleles. Or not alleles. The first 13, oh Lord, my biology people are going to kill me now. Drawing a blank. But those first 13 that we code for in CODIS is what are identical in twins. And you pull it out, it's longer. But for the fingerprints, they're both in utero. That's where your fingerprints form, in your mama's belly. And those twins are in there pushing and fighting each other, and they're moving around. And they have different fingerprints when they are born, based off of movement and differential growth, how they are growing inside the womb. With fingerprints, an examiner will always have to look at them. No computer, even in TV, can you put a fingerprint in there and it automatically tell you who that fingerprint belongs to. An examiner has to look at it. Why? Because there's always distortion in fingerprints. Every time you touch something, you leave a fingerprint behind, but it's distorted because it's not an exact replica of your fingers. Because you're touching something. It's pressure. If you touch this chair, you're leaving a fingerprint, but you're applying pressure to that surface. So it's going to have disturbance. It's going to have distortion to it. And an examiner can see that. They've been trained and they know what to look for. With this type of instrument, it's almost like a Google search. Everybody knows what Google is? So that's what APHIS is at. That's what this computer is. It's an automated fingerprint identification system. But what it's doing is you put the fingerprint in, it's like Google. You put the information in, it goes through everything, pulls up the best candidates for what you're asking it to find. And that's all APHIS does. It gives you the best 10 candidates for you to decide who that print belongs to. And all those little purple dots are called minutiae. And that's what the examiner looks for. And yours are unique for every single finger, on every single joint of that finger, on your palm, on your toes, and the soles of your feet. It's all unique to you and you alone. And each finger's different, and each joint is different, and each palm is different. And nobody can change that, no matter how old you get, except for scars and disease. Your fingerprints will be the same from the time you were born until the time you're worm food, basically until you die and decompose. They're not going to go away. And you're just like a lizard. If we rip off a tail, lizard's tail will grow back. Your fingerprints are the same way. You damage them, they grow right back. And they grow right back in the same exact way, the same exact pattern every single time. It doesn't change. Now, if it's a scar all the way to that regenerating layer, those ridges grow up around that scar, and we can identify you on that scar too. It just becomes another identifying characteristic to you. But yeah, we would love to have this where we search it and we get a name and all the good information about them, but we have this instead. So it works. We make it work. Television CSI. Nice, pretty labs. Big, huge rooms, tables, lights, computers everywhere. It's great. Love to have it. We're public servants. We make no money. Your local police department is poor, so we won't ever afford those pretty labs. Aren't they pretty? And they can do everything. Have you noticed that those labs, they can do DNA, they can fingerprints, they can do ballistics, blood, you name it. Those labs can do it. There's no lab except federal and state-run labs that can do everything. And that's their sole job, is to just analyze evidence. They don't have the money. It's expensive. One DNA test alone can run you about $1,200. One DNA test. You go to a scene with a lot of blood and you're taking a lot of samples and you want to test it for DNA and one test is $1,200, how many tests is your local agency going to let you run? 0. We can't afford it right now. Just set it in evidence and we'll come back to it when we have some money. It's money. So reality. This is a ballistics expert. And what she's looking at is IBIS. She's looking at striations on bullets. That's what she looks for. This is reality. A lot of equipment. You may have one agency that specializes in one thing, maybe two, but that's about it. And your local agencies are going to do things that are more realistic. Your fingerprints, your ballistics, not your DNA, not your toxicology. Toxicology, DUIs, drugs, that's your chemist. You don't have a lot of chemists that are hired to work in a police department. Why? Money. It's money. It's money driven. Same thing with state-run labs. They're great, but a lot of times they're short on personnel. You have backlogs due to the fact that it's money. Your specialists with DNA are biology students. They're biologists. Your chemist doing toxicology. They're getting more money to work in private labs, and so they start out in a state-run lab, they get the experience, and they'll go to a private lab. It's all money-based. So it's great. It's a calling. You have to want to do this because you're never going to get rich off of it. So reality. Autopsies. You want to be covered. Yes, we go to autopsies. Yes, we document injuries, tattoos, fingerprints. We collect evidence at autopsies. We don't step around and poke our fingers in the body. We're not medical examiners. We assist it? No, we don't cut them open, even though I'd like to. I asked, I got denied. But we don't do it. And we only go if we're requested to go. We don't go on every single autopsy. Television, they stand right there, they poke around, and they see everything. If it's really bad, decomposed, we don't have the equipment here in Winston to look at some body that's terribly decomposed because it's a really bad smell. And we need air. We need it fumigated. So we send them to Chapel Hill. They have a room that you can place them in that has air handlers to pull all that nasty air out at one time. But on television, you don't get to smell all that. You get to see the dead bodies, but you don't get to smell it. It's totally different. I promise you. Totally different feeling. We refer to that, and I want my students to have smell-o-vision. So they can do scratch and sniff on the TV maybe and be able to see what it's like. But this is reality. Reality is the medical examiner, and you work side by side, but you do not participate in the autopsy. You don't participate in the cutting of the body or the stabbing of the eyes to get vitreous humor, to get the fluid. You don't do any of that. But you collect the evidence, and you observe, and you document for the medical examiner. Some of the new technology that we are finding that's coming out, in CSI, it's not fake. A lot of it we do. We just don't do it in an hour. Yes, we go out there and we process crime scenes. We use super glue. They show it on TV. It doesn't work that way like they show you. It's not a big smoke-filled tank and it comes out to this perfect print. It's a perfect print because they put that print on there for it to be perfect when they used a gas. But we have these technologies, and all they do is embellish it on TV. They make it so that it's entertaining. They make it look fantastic. A brick is the worst item in the world to try to obtain a fingerprint off of. But on CSI, they're always getting them. You know what a brick looks like? Has all those holes in it. How do you put a fingerprint on a brick? You touch it. How do you retrieve it? There's no way. It's a nasty, ugly surface, and you're not going to be able to retrieve a fingerprint off of it. But on CSI, they do it. It's called paint. You paint a fingerprint on it. You don't realize how many times they cut the camera off and turn it back on and show you something new on that show. But that's what they're doing. The new technology is out there, and we are using it. The top screen shows you rapid ident. You find a body on a scene, you can trace their fingerprints at that time. You can actually put it on, it's like a BlackBerry. It's got a little screen on there, you take an image of it, you send it into an APHIS, and it searches it while you're still on the scene. So you can actually document this now. This is ongoing. It's a great tool. It's coming along in North Carolina. The tool, they're testing it now and utilizing it for traffic stops. Officers can ask you to put your fingerprint on this device and actually search you on scene. It's a safety thing for officers because they need to know if you're a convicted felon. They need to know if you have any outstanding warrants, or you just don't like police and they need to be really cautious to make sure you're not going to attack them. So that's a great device. drones. We love drones, don't we? Aren't they cool? You can use drones for anything. Drones are getting very big in crime scene investigation. They can fly over, they can document your scene, they can document scenes when they're not even safe for the CSI to be in them. That's key. You have a major incident involving a train or a plane with hazardous fuels, hazardous waste, any kind of biological thing that a person cannot go to, you can have a drone fly over and document. It's a safety thing. But you're also getting that bird's eye view that the CSI can't get from this level photographing it or videotaping. They can look up here and document the whole scene. Drones have, in the past year, exploded. It's a big topic for a lot of crime scene agencies now is how can we afford them and how can we utilize them. Policies and procedures have to be put in place before they're actually used on crime scenes because they have to stand up in court. A challenge to court if we use a drone on a crime scene. But it's a great technology, not only for the safety of the crime scene, but for police as well. So it's a wonderful technology that's come about. The last picture is ballistics. The new devices that are searching ballistics now are actually doing it 3D. So they're not only just looking at the striations on one side, they can actually turn it and look at it on all sides at one time, and it can be like a molded impression. The 3D printers that are coming out are another tool that they're using in ballistics and actually trying to replicate those bullets that have been fired. So it's some of the new technology that you'll be seeing on CSI or have already seen on some of the CSI shows that are already being utilized in the real world. And they're great. Rapid DNA. I saw a CSI not too long ago where they opened up the back of the Hummer and they had this little instrument and they took a blood sample and stuck it inside of it and they waited a few minutes and they checked it and there was the guy's DNA. It was positive. Loved it. It's great. Would love to have it. Rapid ident is becoming available for DNA. They are making some small devices that can actually turn out DNA samples if it is a good sample. It's not degraded, but they can within an hour to 2 hours now. So some of the advances that we're seeing, we may see it on a show, it's bringing up positive research in reality. Things that you see on TV, yeah, it's on TV, but how can we make it real? How can we utilize that? And it's actually spurring on technology advances in crime scene with researchers. So it's a good thing. It's not bad. It's just different. This is our program up in the Northwest Versailles Center. And some of the equipment that we utilize for training our students. And these instruments and these equipment is the same thing that you see in law enforcement agencies today. They're trained on the same exact equipment that's being utilized in most agencies in North Carolina. You have a fuming chamber. It's for superglue, cyanoacrylate, fuming any type of object for fingerprints. And all superglue does is its job. It adheres that fingerprint onto the surface for the technician to utilize dyes or powders to be able to obtain that fingerprint. And the bottom is our APHIS system. We actually have a working APHIS system at the Northwest Versailles Center. It's not hooked up to the state, so I can't run my students' prints, even though some of them I'd like to. But it is a working APHIS system. And this is actually utilized in most agencies in North Carolina for them to learn how to run prints. They put their own prints in there. They obtain latent or unknown prints using powders and dyes, and they can search their own prints. They can search their classmates' prints, the suspects. So they're utilizing the same instrumentation that they are in the real world, so they can go out and be ready for that job. And I'm hoping that they also learn that it's not like TV. A lot of people, when we first started teaching, or when I first started teaching, when I asked them, what do you think? What do you think is a real CSI? What do you want? Oh, I want to drive around a Hummer. No, that's not it. I want to wear those cool clothes. I want to go to work in Miami. Okay, you can, but that's not like the one on TV. You have to be aware. I think they're realizing now that it's a big difference between the two, and I'm great, and I'm glad. But they're also realizing it's a hard job. It's dirty, it's long hours, and you don't really get a thank you at the end of the day sometimes. You have to want to do it. But it's very satisfying if you're one of those people who want to solve problems and try to find the truth. And that's what CSIs do. They collect evidence, they analyze it, and they give it to the detectives to figure out who did it. And that's all they do. It's a great job. I love it, still love it, love to teach it and bring up the next generation because I'm too old to be doing it anymore. But I want to bring up the next generation to do it right and to appreciate that it's so important to find that evidence and to utilize it for what it's for. And the end is justice. That's all you're seeking. That's it.
We have time for some questions. If anybody has any questions,
I do. Okay.
let me come up there with the mic so we can all hear you.
Oh.
You didn't hear me?
I didn't.
I'm sorry. Why do you say you're too old to do it anymore?
Oh, I pick on my students a lot, and I say there's not an age limit. I feel like I am. It's rotating shifts. The majority of the time, it's rotating shifts. You're working 12 to 14 to possibly 16 hours. If you're on a case, homicide, you just don't get to leave. If your shift is over with at 10 o'clock and you're in the middle of a homicide, you're going to stay there and work. It's not like you get to go home. It's a lot of what I tell my students. Crime scenes don't happen in nice little controlled spaces. They happen outside. They happen on tops of buildings and down in ravines, and you have to be physically active and able to handle that type. You're carrying a lot of equipment. It stresses out your body. So I think that for me personally, I'm wore out. So I don't think there's any age limit, but to your own limitations.
Other questions? This is your chance.
You talked a lot about the technology that students are learning and what they might be doing out in the field, but how much training in the law do they need to, and do they get in the program in terms of, oh, this, I know I need to collect the evidence this way, but do I need to have it back within 6 months, or this crime's going to be past the statute of limitations and things like that?
That's a good question. I mean, our students are taught criminal law as well. That's part of the program, part of the curriculum. But in types of statute of limitations, each crime has their own statute. Of course, with homicides, for murder, there's no statute of limitations. But with evidence, your job is to collect it and bring it back. Now, it's up to the detective to find a suspect. Say you have a house break-in and you don't have a suspect. The evidence never brings about a suspect for 3-4 years. And then all of a sudden you have a suspect. Well, if the statute of limitations run out on that house break-in, then you can't prosecute at that time. But it doesn't mean you don't go out there and do your job. You don't go out there and stop collecting evidence. Because if you're just waiting and hoping that you're going to get a suspect, why go out? Because you may not. The majority of the crimes are not even solved. But if you don't even try to collect evidence, you're never going to solve it. So you at least have to do it. Now, whether it ever gets solved, it's further along the line. Does that answer your question?
Questions?
Okay.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Thanks for a great lecture. Just wanted to know what the range was in terms of pay for the people that you train.
Oh, salary. Salary's a good question. Most crime scene technicians, investigators, will work for local law enforcement agencies. And salary-wise, it can be anywhere starting out in the 30s all the way up into the 50s, depending on your qualifications and the size of the agency. Smaller agencies, of course, the scales are going to be lower because they can't afford it. There are non-sworn positions. Most agencies are going to have non-sworn crime scene people. That means you don't carry a badge, you don't carry a gun. Reality, they're carrying badges. They're going in there shooting. they're chasing after suspects. CSIs don't do that. You're hoping that they are not shooting at you when you get there. You know, it's hard to think about people shooting at you when you're trying to find those little tiny pieces of evidence. When your mind is so concentrated on searching for evidence, you don't want to think about what's behind me. Is there somebody going to come up and try to stab me in my back while I'm sitting here? If you're a criminal, are you going to shoot the officer that is standing there, or are you going to shoot that person that's collecting that evidence? Because what's going to convict you? The evidence. So you're the target. Most crime scene people don't think about it that way. Most students in crime scene have not really thought about it. And I try to remind them, we're issued ballistic vests for a reason. Because you are out there, and that's your job, is to collect that evidence. And that evidence is going to put somebody away, and they really don't want that. So they really don't want you collecting it. So you have to really think about the scary part of that job is, even though you're not carrying a gun, and you're not going out and arresting people, your job is so important that you become a target. And I want my students to be aware of that before they go into the job. So, you're not going to bank, I said it before, you won't be rich being a CSI. It's quality of life, and if you're fulfilled by doing what you do, that's the most important thing.
Last chance for questions.
Yes.
What's the time frame in which you're expected to be there at the crime scene and have either started or finished collecting all the evidence you need to collect?
There's not really a time frame. Each crime scene is different. If I break into this house today and steal the TV, and a person comes out and processes it in 30 minutes, and tomorrow I break into the same house, but I ransack it looking for jewelry and money. So now there's a lot more damage, and there's a lot more things that a crime scene person has to do. So I may be out there an hour or an hour and a half, because each single crime scene is different. Same house, same victim, but the crime scene's totally different. So you cannot predict how long you're going to be out there, and you don't know how many pieces of evidence you're going to pick up, because you don't know what you're looking for till you get there. You're expected to respond when you're called, but you may be on one crime scene when you're called out for another one, and they just have to wait, because there's not enough people sometimes to fill them. And if you're covering the city of Winston, which right now is the 5th largest in the state, it's hard when you only have 5 people working that's covering the whole city. So sometimes victims get really upset when they're having to wait 2 and 3 hours for a crime scene person to come out. If it's like, you know, and it's priority. A homicide is going to outweigh a housebreaking because it's property crimes. So that's how it works. It's all politics, right? Schematics.
I have a question about the small cities' budgets that can't afford the personnel and equipment, and it rolls over, I don't know, to the county or to the state, but they have crimes just like large cities, and a lot of the crimes that are happening in small cities outside of the large cities. So what happens in that case when they just don't have the budget and the personnel to get the evidence that's needed?
A lot of the smaller counties have trained their deputies, their law enforcement officers, to be crime scene as well, and they'll pull double duty. And some of them will contract out with the bigger cities to come help if they have a major crime, and the state will come out if it's a homicide or officer-involved shooting, that type of thing. The state will come out and actually process that scene for them. So they have ways. In this state, it's free for any agency to send any evidence to the state lab to be processed. That's taxpayer dollars. They get that bulk of money to help pay for that processing. But the time lab, because they are short-staffed, the backlogs, if you're looking for the crime lab to look at latent prints now, you're talking 18 months to 2 years. DNA can run, if it's not a major, if it's not a homicide, if it is a homicide, you're still looking about 8 months to a year for DNA, longer, depending on how many pieces of evidence you have. You know, most crime scenes can generate upwards of 100 pieces of evidence easily. And you're looking at all that has to be stored somewhere. It has to be cataloged. It has to be kept because it has to be used in court. Well, some of these cases don't even go to court for 2, 3, 4 years. So it has to be housed somewhere. And DNA has to be housed refrigerated. It has to be kept stored either in a freezer or refrigerator. So that's a big part of where the money or the budget's going to, is going into storing evidence. Good question.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. JJ. I, for one, thank you for your service to our country, both in the military and also with the Winston-Salem Police Department. I don't think it's a job I would want to have. I think it would be very interesting, but it would be awfully icky. So thank you. And thank you for training people to take over. And also thank you for taking your time to come here today and help us educate the world about what we're doing and what crime scene investigation is really like. And as a small token of our appreciation, we would like to present you with this certificate.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Some of you may not ever get to see what we do or see it in real life. I have brought some samples, some things that we do ballistic-wise, some of our fingerprint stuff, and some of our castings where we do dental impressions, some of our kits that we utilize. I brought it up for you to look at. I do have cards about our programs if you're interested, and I'll put my business card out there. If you have any questions, you're free to call me, email me, come see me. I don't mind. I'll try to answer whatever questions you have. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi.
Russ Reed. I came a little late. I was going well. We had a meeting.
Oh, nice
Yeah,
to meet
thanks
you.
very much. Yeah. My house was broken into and a whole bunch
Oh,
of guys came. Yeah, about 5, 6 years ago.